So grid systems, the rule of thirds, the almighty rule of thirds, actually sucks. No, it doesn't suck, but it's a pretty bad rule. So we'll have a look at it. Just to explain it very quickly, even though everybody knows about it, the rule of thirds is this basically idea of you take your frame and you divide it into 9 equal frames or squares or sections or areas. And basically the idea is that those elements are supposed to be point of interest and like natural place that you're going to see, and those thirds are supposed to be places or like lines where you're supposed to align specific structural element of your image. The rule of thirds of today is like basically the problem with the rule of third is that it's an oversimplification of the original rule, which was back then an oversimplification of composition principles. So we'll dig a little bit deeper in there in order to get like a better understanding of what is the rule of third, how you can actually use it in a sort of a little bit more interesting way, and see how we can save it. So where did all this start? First, it started with a guy named John Thomas Smith, who was a painter basically. And he was writing a book called The Remarks on Rural Scenery. And in it, he said, in short, in applying this invention, so the rule of thirds, generally speaking, or to any other case, whether of light, shade, form, or color, I have found the ratio of about 2/3 to 1/3, or of 1 to 2, a much better and more harmonizing proportion than any other proportion whatever. So, cool. I mean, so this is like one thing that you can already notice, I think, is that he's talking about light, shade, form, and color. And the problem, or like the number one problem that people have, is that people generally only use it for framing, meaning the grid just to place objects. And this is not what the original rule of third was. As John was saying, is this idea is that you have to use it for every component of composition, so color, frame, lighting, objects, etc. And if you start using this, it can actually be interesting. Is like, where do I make my shades fall, my shadow falls? Where do I put the light? How do I organize my colors? If I have 1/3 of this color and 2/3 of this other color, etc. This is the actual rule of thirds and how he meant it to be used. And this is generally not how people use it. What he meant is really just this idea of this type of ratio is interesting. So we're not really there anymore. Another big issue that is a little bit problematic with this rule, though, is that the rule of thirds was meant to be a simplified version of the golden ratio. The problem is the golden ratio is because people start to really have a poor understanding of like mathematics and geometry. They tend to squeeze and resize everything. And the problem is the actual rule of third is indeed close to a golden ratio, but only if you're putting the rule of third on a golden ratio. If you start elongating your rule of third frame, then it doesn't align with anything with the golden ratio. And so all your ratios are completely fucked and you don't have the same sort of like logic that you were thinking you were having at the beginning. The original, let's say, way of using it should be only within a golden ratio rectangle, which is extremely, like constraining. And as I was saying earlier, it's like we don't have that type of constraints anymore with aspect ratio, so it would be a bit stupid to focus on just golden ratio in order to use a rule properly. But still, nonetheless, this is how it was meant to be used originally. So normally this kind of ratio, the 1 to 3, 2 to 3, sorry, 1 to 2, doesn't make sense outside of a golden rectangle, according to the rule itself. And point third that is interesting is that the intersection points are supposed to naturally attracting the eye. And the thing is that this is like complete bullshit. As I mentioned in a different perception aspect, in the perception diamond, your eyes are always drawn to like the greatest area of contrast or the area where there's like the maximum information. Whether this is on an intersection point of your rule of third or not has absolutely zero consequence. If I have my image like this and my GAC is here and all the point of interest are here, even if all my intersection points from my rule of third are here, then my eyes will naturally be drawn to that place. They will not be naturally drawn to any other area. So these like idea of how your eyes is supposed to naturally be experiencing the frame is completely wrong, because it's the composition of your image that will make your eye go from one place to another. And the rule of third is not a composition rule itself. It's just the underlying grid on which you can start to put stuff, but it's just not how your eyes are going to behave. And the thing is that it's not like more pleasant to have your eyes going in a certain area than another. Or it can be pleasant in a way. It's just, you're creating more or less tension. But the thing is, I mean, it's not necessarily bad. That's the thing I think that is problematic, is that we have this sort of tendency of thinking that everything is bad if it's not according to that rule. Elements should be placed on intersection points because, as I said, is like, it's just this idea that there's only one way of creating an image. And as I've tried to show in the diamond and perception, there are like many ways of organizing your image that will create different types of tension. And this type of tension can be more or less interesting for you depending on your intent. If we always place the elements the same way in an image, it just means that we're always going to resolve tension the same way. So the rule of thirds is just a way of not creating too much tension and not creating too much calm. This is basically what it's doing. It's not uninteresting, but it's way less interesting than what people are making it to be. So basically, yeah, the rule of thirds is just one of many ways of organizing tensions and visual weights in your frame. And it doesn't necessarily create neither good nor bad images. Now, what else can we say about this? Is really like this idea, as I was saying, is the fact that it's divided in three, as its author was saying, is that it's sort of like harmonizing. And the idea of harmony and balance back in the days was really this idea of, we were not really after too much tension. The thing is, nowadays, I think it's a little bit more interesting to look for more interesting, or let's say original ways of working, or at least trying to expand our horizon on like how we can make images. And if you just focus on the rule of thirds, it's this idea that you're going to resolve the tension always the same way. Understanding, and this is why I don't like the rule of thirds the way it's taught usually, is that people think that it's just a very simple way of creating good images. It's not creating good images, it's just creating images with a certain type of tension. What you need to understand is that, is it the type of tension you're looking for? It can happen that you can put a rule of third grid on top of your image and it will fit perfectly. You'll be like, yeah, okay, and this is the type of image I want. It's completely fine. The thing is that I don't want you ideally to think that because you're following the rule of third, then your image is good. This is not how it works. Your image is good if, when you look at it, the tensions are resolved in a way that it creates the effect that you're looking for. And if it happens to be following a rule of third, then so be it. It doesn't matter. But it's better to have the understanding of the underlying principles that are like governing the way we read images.